Hello, everyone. We are continuing today with causative verbs, the second part of our causative verbs lesson. We studied these a bit last time, and we learned that they're used to show two things. There's two things that the saseru form of verbs can show. And does anyone remember what are the two things that you can show with saseru? Allow or make. Yes. In fact, that's allow. You usually don't allow is correct. It's 100% correct. But as far as English translations go, allow is usually written in the form let in the sentence, and then make is definitely used. So if we're talking about how do you see it in the English, you usually see let or make. But in terms of what's actually happening, yes, saseru is used to show someone allowing someone else to do something, or someone forcing someone else to do something. And typically, it will come in this form. Let's review this because you'll see how it filters into today's lesson. So typically we have, I'm going to call it the, let's call it the enforcer. That sounds better. The enforcer. The enforcer, or the doer, is usually at the front of the sentence. And then whoever is being forced or allowed to do it is usually marked with ni. Sometimes o, depending on which verb you're using. So if for some reason I decide to be an evil teacher today and make everyone talk, and make everyone give a presentation, we might have something like this. And I am using kanji since this is N4, but I will read it out. Sensei wa seito tachi ni happyou saseru. Those first two, those first two words you're probably familiar with. You might not be familiar with the third one, happyou. Happyou is to present or to give a presentation. Usually more the give a presentation or announce something. For example, we will announce, this is something I'm waiting for, we'll announce who won the lottery to buy the new Pokemon cards. And you would say, happyou, it's a presentation, an announcement kind of thing. So in this case, whoever is making them do it, you put the wa with them. Whoever is receiving that order is getting the ni. The same way, it goes the same way if you're doing the allow. Now, usually context will let you know if someone is making someone do something or allowing them to do something. So if I use the sentence above, you'd probably guess they're making the kids give presentations. Because I was a teacher for almost 15 years, and not once did I say, you'll be giving a presentation, and the kids said, yay! It never happened. Not once. They said, ugh, so many times, but they never said yay. However, if I said, I'll let you listen to music today, or I'm going to let you watch TV because I'm sick and I couldn't make my teacher's lesson, then they might say, yay, that's great. And so you pick it up from context. So, a few more review points before we jump in. We're not going to talk about the way that you make each of the causative forms, although let's practice actually, because that's going to tie right in with what we're doing today. I'm going to give you the base form. For example, taberu. Please give me the base causative form. And like we usually do, this isn't a first person to answer wins and then no one else should type anything. It's as many people want to type the answer should type the answer. And you can give the dictionary form like Stefu gave. You can also give the mas form like name truncated gave. Both are fine. But it's tabe saseru. Tabe saseru. How about call? For example, if my mother made me buy a new shirt. Kawaseru. Thank you. How about this one? This one actually comes up very often. If you make someone make someone wait. Matsu. And you will hear this sometimes in Japanese. This particular one is more common than the other ones because you will hear an apology if someone makes you wait. And so since we have time today, let me split off on that for just a minute. You might hear something like this. Matasete sumimasen. I made you wait and I'm sorry. And when the context is clear, you don't need the doer or the recipient because you're talking directly to them. But usually when you make someone wait, I'll answer your question in just a second. When you make someone wait, you usually take it and you make it a bit more formal, by which I mean you actually lower yourself a bit. It's often the case with, if you're in a business environment and, for example, you ask someone to get your package from the back and they come back and they're like, I'm sorry for making you wait. This is beyond the level that we're teaching, but I'm just going to throw it out. This is you hear this a lot. Omatase shimashita. And this is going to make your brains fall apart. This is the humble version of the causative form. The humble version of the causative form. And I'm not going to get into humble construction, but just you can remember this one because it comes up so often in Japan. It's like, I made you wait. And you're lowering yourself relative to them. And so you often hear this. Someone comes out from the back and they say, oh, I made you wait. Omatase shimashita. Here's your package. Here's your cake, or whatever it happens to be. So just store that single word away. The matasete shimaimashita you could use if you're going for a more apologetic tone, but there's no apology actually in there. So if you said matasete shimaimashita, you would follow it up with a sorry, gomen nasai or sumimasen. And so we typically hear not that as much as just the I made you wait, I'm sorry, which is one line above there. Okay. Anyway, so we've got our verbs here, our causative verbs. And as people have been conjugating, you'll notice that our verbs, our causative ones, saseru, they are ichidan. And so it doesn't matter what it started as. If it was a godan originally, as soon as it switches over to the causative form, it becomes ichidan. Now, you might be wondering why the first panel of this lesson talks about passive tense, because there is a form called the causative passive. The causative passive form. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Fortunately, this is the last time we will ever talk about causative, but this comes up a lot. Now, before we talk about this specific one, does anyone remember what passive form can be used for? Other than the core passive form, which is present in most languages. Which is, describing the action without the subject. The building was made 100 years ago. There was a few other, specifically one I'm thinking of. There was another way to use the passive form that's very unique to Japanese. It has a very specific nuance to it. Does anyone remember what it was. You could call it suffering. Yeah, sure. X is also correct, talking about using it as an honorific form. But suffering or negative, I'm gonna rephrase that slightly. Although I like that naming. It's to show something undesirable. It's to show something undesirable from the speaker's perspective. So if it started to rain, you could say "ame ga furaremashita," and you're not doing it to get rid of the subject. The subject is there. It's the rain. The rain is falling. But you can use the passive to say the rain falls and that sucks. Like you're adding that personal dislike of the situation. You often hear it with in anime and manga when it's talking about asking someone out. You had that whole kokuhaku thing where you say, "I love you. Please date me." And not the other way around. And the guy or girl, whoever, says no. And then you say, "I was rejected." And it could be that the word is, you could be saying they rejected me, which is an active sentence, active voice sentence, but the passive is used to show, and this isn't good. This isn't what I wanted. Now I'm bringing this up because what we're talking about today follows along with that. Now, we already talked that the causative form, one of the two forms, is to make someone do something, to force someone to do something. And usually that's not good. Usually, that presentation that we were talking about before. Oh yeah, yarareta. Sure. Usually you want, if you're talking about the teacher making you do something, or your parents, making you clean your room, you want to complain about it. There's nothing wrong with that. You need to get that stress out. With the causative and the passive together, you can do that. I'm not going to say easily, but you can do that. So let's take a quick look. Here we've got 4 verbs. They're all verbs that you should be familiar with. Taberu, nomu, suru, and kuru. The second version of the verbs, those are our causative forms that we learned last week. Tabesaseru, nomaseru, saseru, and kosaseru. If you take that causative form and then add the passive onto the end of it, you get this new form. And they are long. They are long. Wizard's reaction is exactly what I thought when I first saw it, for many times after I saw it. And I would like you, don't turn your mics on, I would like you to try repeating these quietly to yourself after I say them. And I'm going to say them slow at first, and then I'm going to try and I'll say them at normal speed, normal spoken speed. And just try saying them to yourself. So first, from the top. Tabe saserareru. Tabe saserareru. Now, the rareru that comes on the end, it usually, like in terms of your speed, there's not a stress exactly, but I feel like there's this ever so slightest bit of pausing between chunks of it. So if you try and read each hiragana separately, it's going to be a bad time. You're not going to enjoy it. But with tabe, I'm going to say very slow. I usually say tabe, sase, rareru. There's 3 parts. And there's just the slightest bit of a break in between them. Ever so slight. Tabe sase rareru. With the other ones, it's just 2. Nomase and then rareru. Nomase rareru. One more time. Nomase rareru. Then there's sase rareru and こうさせられる. If you speak in a native speed, the first one I don't you don't need to try this yourself, but it'd probably be closer to 食べさせられる, which it's hard to get there. It's very hard to get there. It takes using it over and over again. It's not something where you can get it right in your head and then say it. You just have to practice saying it until your tongue gets used to untangling itself and getting those words out. Now, a few more. The su verbs are a little different. Well, excuse me. These actually, they're fine. But with the u verb, take a look. It's, before we were kind of doing awaserareru, but here it's slightly different. So take a look at these. And other than su, I'll give you an example in just a minute, but these don't have the rareru. They just have, if we go by the rule before, it would be awase rareru. But fortunately, someone decided, let's make these a bit shorter. They're suffering enough with those other ones, let's shorten these up. So you've got awasareru, kikasareru, motasareru, shinasareru. And if there's a warning about this in the new version of Renshu, because we have conjugation quizzes in there, but I'm going to mention it in here. If you're wondering why Renshu talks about death so much, it's because the verb shinu is the only real verb in modern Japanese that ends in nu. And so all those conjugation spellings, u verbs, you do this, and ku verbs, you do that, su verbs, you do this. There's no other verb that we can use. So if we're talking about how to conjugate the new verbs or verb, we have to use shinu. And the new version of Renshu that'll be out to everyone, hopefully at the end of the month, very explicitly says, hey, we're not suggesting death. It's just that this is the only verb you can use. And so if you're ever exposed to it, you need to know what it means. A few more. These are all still our Godan verbs. Asobaseru, asobasareru, sumasareru, and kairasareru. Now, some of these you just don't hear in this form that often. So actually for me, sumasareru, I've never heard this actually used. There's some verbs that you see very, very frequently because they're things that are often actions that someone makes someone else do. So there is a contraction taking place here. So instead of, there's no se in there. Asobaserareru. The se and the ra kind of get combined into sa. Now, if you want to use the full form, you can. So let me give you a quick example of the full ones because I've just given them to you verbally up until this point. So you've got asobu. Asobaseru. There's your causative form. Asobaserareru. There's your long one. Or slightly shorter. Slightly shorter. Either of these is fine. Either of them is fine. But so choose whichever one works best for you. It might be easier to say I want to keep the rule where they always end in rareru. and go with that. And then slowly you might say, okay, now I understand the rule. It's easier for me to break it down into that contraction. Now, I don't think su was not mentioned in there. And let me show you why. So if you have osu, as in to push, osareru. Now, if we used our contraction rule, right, that we had just a second ago, it would look like this. Let's see if I can type this. You might see the problem. Osasareru. Those two sa's, those don't really look too great. Osaserareru. So you typically see this one, the full one. There's not that reaction, or the contraction one, you don't really see. Okay, let's see some actual examples. We've talked about the verb itself long enough. Let's jump in. Now, there's no difference in the information that's being presented in these two sentences. The two sentences are exactly the same in terms of what is happening and describing those. So the first one is what we learned last week. Straight up causative. The teacher is making the students do homework. Boo! Bad teacher. Sensei wa seito ni shukudai o saseta. The teacher made the students do the homework. Now, relatively speaking, who is more important in that first sentence? The teacher, excuse me. They're the topic. They're the topic of the sentence, and the poor students, they're receiving that action. But we're focusing on what the teacher did here. However, if you want to focus on the students, which might be you might be one of the students, and it's almost like a poor students, oh, they were made to do this, so you're directing the pity at the subject, you flip them around. Seito wa sensei ni shukudai o saserareta. Now, this is the same form that we use for passive. When we did the passive actions before, the passive voice, the doer of the passive voice was always in the ni. So let me give you an example. Let's see. 1 second. So if we're talking about a picture or a painting that someone did, kono e wa kare ni kakareta. This painting was painted by him. The painting is the focus of the sentence, so it comes first. And we're using that ni particle to mention who did it. But it's just that's not the important part. The important part is the painting. Same thing is happening here. The important thing comes first. Always, 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 always. The important thing comes first, so that's the poor students. Seito wa sensei ni shukudai o saserareta. The students were made to do the homework by the teacher. And this is it. This is all of this form. Constructing the form is extremely difficult. It takes time for that to sink into your heads. However, actually using it, you use it in the same way that you've used passive before. And since we've done passive before, once you grasp that and you master that, this is the same thing. It's the same thing happening, except we're talking about the forcing of some action. It's not that this teacher, did that. It's the teacher made us do that for us. So, because this lesson is particularly short, I'd like to spend a bit more time than usual practicing. And first, I want to practice let's actually practice typing out those verbs a few times, and then we'll talk about making some sentences and then wrap things up. So, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you, a verb. And I'd like you to give me the causative passive. That's the actual name for what we're doing here, causative passive. Please give me the causative passive form of the verb. Now, compared to other ones, this one's going to take people more time to think about. Think it through in their head. So if you're answering, please use spoilers when you're answering. And if you don't know how to use spoilers, it's, they're called pipes or bars. You use 2 of those on either side of your message, just in case you haven't done this before. And it looks like that. FIFO, yes. Yeah, I happily can talk about that at the end. If I forget, please remind me. But yes, I can talk about that. Okay, so I'm going to give you, let me give you a quick example. If I'd said suru, then you might do this. Saserareru. Sounds like you're singing bars for music class. So type it out that way, please. That way, other people that are still thinking, they can, take their time. If it takes you a minute to type this out, that's fine. That's totally fine. I just want you to try. Oh, you can highlight text, or you can do that. Whatever works best for you. Or don't type it at all. You can just write it on a piece of paper in front of you and then see the answer afterwards. Okay, so first one is something that happens a lot in Japan. You feel compelled to keep eating. They keep saying eat, eat, and it's rude to say no, so you're kind of being forced to eat. I was forced to eat. It doesn't have to be past tense. Let's keep it in just present tense. Keep it simple. And I'm going to put the answer out. Tabe saserareru. Tabe saserareru. Now I'm going to try and stick to verbs. I could see these being used in this form. So how about motsu? For example, someone made you hold something for a long time. My big brother made me hold the bags when we went shopping. Don't worry, take your time. Yeah, motsu and matsu really confused me for quite some time when I was first learning. In fact, I see both kanji appearing in the answers. I think just as a small mnemonic, motsu, it looks like 2 arms, that radical on the left, it looks like 2 arms holding on to something because you're holding it. Whereas matsu, it looks to me like it's a person. You see the little person character on the left, it looks like a person leaning against the temple, waiting. So Motsu is the one with the two arms grabbing the long pole. Matsu is the person leaning against the temple next to them. Anyway, the answer is... and it looks even worse with with no kanji. Mota saserareru. Let's do about two more. Do two more. How about this? People make people say things all the time. So if someone makes you say something, now there are two versions. I see both of them coming up, the long one and the short one. And so you've got iwase rareru or you've got iwasareru. Okay, last one. Last one. We're going with the teacher making students do thing motif today. So how about yomu? Read. Okay, answer coming up. Two answers. Yomasareru or yomaserareru. Okay, let's end today's lesson by actually practicing this with some sentences. And this is that time where you're free to complain. So tell me, what is something that you have had someone make you do? And let's stick with let's stick with, like, say, parents or siblings or teachers. And so just so we get the full, now usually we drop watashi wa, but just so we can see that full structure, let's make sure you get watashi wa in the front of there. And let's talk about the bad person. And so I'm going to use the example I always use. The teacher made me clean the room. 私は先生に掃除させられた。So it looks like X is complaining about their good friends, their great friends that make them use Renshu every day. So, Stefu, you have a really interesting sentence. And Wizard, I'll comment on yours in just a second. I usually don't see, in fact, I don't think I've ever seen the sugi or sugiru verb suffix used in this form. I would probably say it would be more natural and less insanity on the verb if you took out the sugiru and put it in as an adverb somewhere, like itsumo or mainichi. Wizard was asking about, wait, before there. Sure. That works. Yeah, Wizard, that works. It might be give, although I feel like give is usually more of a free action. And so you might see a different verb in there. For example, hand over. Like watasu. My little brother made me hand over money to them. Grammatically, it's fine. I'm not sure if ageru is the best verb, but your structure is great. But yeah, Steph, I always feel confused myself, to be honest, when sugiru comes up and when you can and cannot use it. And I feel like sugiru usually ends the verb chain. It usually ends it, or it's followed by the like shimatta. Like tabesugite shimatta. I ate too much. But I usually don't see sugiru itself being adjusted in any way. It either ends it or it's in a te form and followed by something else. I'm not sure if that's an actual rule. It's just over the years of seeing it being used, I typically see it in that sense. And sorry, I didn't look at everyone's sentences because I was answering questions. Although I did want to point out Shoyu's one, you do hear this one a lot. Ikaserareta. As in I was made to go. Maybe you don't want to go to school, but your parents make you go. So from the kid's perspective, they're like, oh, it's not that I have to go. It's that my parents made me go to school today. They're terrible or whatever. So you do hear ikaserareru. Some verbs you're just probably never going to hear in this form. But some of them are much more common. Okay, I believe we are finished with today's lesson. So if you have any questions specific to the causative passive, feel free to ask now. Otherwise, we do have a few minutes and I can answer other questions after this lesson is over. Now, I would like to point something out real fast while I'm waiting for potential questions to pop up. Depending on when people see this video, this might be something in the past where you don't have to do this. But if you are currently using the regular version of Renshu, not the experimental version, I highly suggest you come and join us in the experimental version. It's stable, it's easy to get to, and you just go to settings, go down to experimental, and then join the new server. The reason for that is this. Let me show you something really cool. On your dashboard in the new server, aside from things looking a lot nicer, you can go down to manage your schedules. And under all schedules, that's everything Renshu has for you. We've got verb and adjective schedules available. And what these do is they help you focus on the spelling, that thing that we were just doing. And in fact, I have one built already, my verb conjugation schedule. And you can even see, if you go down to add, remove materials, you can choose all the different ones you want to practice. And I think way down at the bottom, you can practice causative passive form if you'd like. And this is a much easier way to drill the verb forms if you need it. So this is not available in the normal version of Renshu, not yet anyway. So feel free to jump in, again, through the settings panel if you want to. Otherwise, thank you so much for everyone. And Wizard, let me answer this real fast. Potential form, passive or causative. Causative, I'd say no, because you're not talking about whether or not you can do something. I would say if you were saying, for example, because I was a teacher, my mind always goes to teachers. Maybe I want to make the kids stay after school to study extra because they were sleeping in class or something. And so that might be, I'm about to do this. Another teacher says, no, you can't make them stay. You can't make them stay. But with that, what you would probably see, you wouldn't see the potential form being used. You'd probably see something like this. Now, first off, it wouldn't be the causative passive because we're talking about the teacher. One teacher's telling me you can't make them do that. You might see this. This is more common. Matasete wa ikenai, like you can't make them wait. Or something like this. Mataseru koto ga dekinai. Which in a sense is one of the potential forms. Like making them wait, that's not, you can't do that. But in the sense of chaining them, where you've got like the causative form and then you change the end of the causative form to potential or whatever, that doesn't happen. It would be a disaster. The verb would just go on for 2 or 3 lines. So definitely not. And Sapphire, I can help you once we end this lesson. Okay, thank you everyone for joining. If you need to look at this lesson, it is in Renshu under resources and Japanese lessons. And then the video will be available in Renshu as well as here in the Discord server and on our YouTube channel. Thank you so much, and I hope to see you next time.